In the year 2000, Nintendo was a company in transition. Despite the Nintendo 64 still churning out critical darlings like Majora's Mask and Perfect Dark, it was a 4-year-old console at that time and the writing was on the wall. The end was coming quickly and it was time for something new. During Nintendo's annual conference and trade show, Space World, in the year 2000, the floor was buzzing with new hardware. The latest N64 games were on display, and the Game Boy Advance was less than a year away. But the big surprise at that year's show was the GameCube, Nintendo's next generation console. And what better way to show off a new console than with some good old-fashioned teasers? So in the midst of a GameCube presentation that contained Metroid Prime and other notable titles, we got the following. Now, there's no narration, and this is a visual, but this is the audio of a 30-second clip of an adult Link battling an adult Ganon running on the new hardware. This quick bit of video sparked the birth of what was known as GameCube Zelda, the next evolution of Nintendo's new focus on adult gamers. See, even then, Nintendo was considered the kiddie company. They weren't extreme like Xbox or sophisticated like PlayStation with all of their JRPGs, and hardcore gamers were ecstatic that Adult Link would be the next big title for Nintendo's new console. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Fast forward a year, and at Space World 2001, fans saw this. Now again, this is a visual with no narration, but instead of adult Link facing off against his old nemesis, they were treated with a cartoon. An anime-styled Zelda game more aligned with Pokemon than Hyrule. The characters were goofy, the action was frankly slapstick, and Link was most certainly a child. Nintendo wasn't veering from its family-friendly origins. They were leaning into it. Needless to say, reaction was mixed at best. Some reports say the Space World audience responded with a polite yet bewildered applause. Some of the attendees looking at each other saying, "What did we just watch?" Internet forums were ablaze with disappointed fans wondering what the hell was Nintendo thinking. The IGN message board created a special official Zelda, say, complaint thread that contained over 270 posts, most screaming about the trailer betrayal. The thread still exists online, so if you like to peruse old internet rage, which is really just the same as current internet rage, just not as sophisticated, the link is in the show notes. The demo didn't even have a title, so many people thought this might be footage from a remake of the original 1986 game. But surely this can't be the next big title in the Zelda series. It just can't be. Everyone wanted the more realistic Zelda promised the year before. And as we all know, that horribly received trailer became one of the most beloved Zelda titles in a long line of classic epics. If there was ever a come-from-behind kid in the Zelda series, this cel-shaded adventure is probably the most dramatic and most deserved. Time to pull our GameCubes from the closet by their convenient travel handle, pop in that tiny disc, and get our Tingle Tuner at the ready as we explore the cel-shaded boy wonder, The Legend of Zelda: Wind Waker.
In the land of Hyrule, the wind echoes a legend that tells of a boy who became a man. He traveled to the ends of the earth, challenging the forces of nature, testing the limits of his will, all to fulfill his destiny, which is, above all else, to save me.
The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Rated E for everyone.
Starting us off with our journey through Wind Waker by sharing their first impressions of the game, is Justin from Killer Quail Studios, followed by the Lord Reverend D of the Rulebooks Anonymous podcast, Seth Sturgill of the All In podcast, and finally, Alan Petrozzi.
Oh yeah, like I did play Wind Waker at the time. Like that was an interesting time because like, oh man, because when the GameCube came out, like they had a really cool trailer of Link, just like a 3D like Ocarina of Time Link and all that stuff. So that was like what's going on in your head, like, oh, this could be so cool. Then you see the cartoony stuff of it. It's like, oh.
Was that how it struck you when you first saw it?
Yeah, a little bit. Like it took me a little bit of time to get used to it. But again, that's just I think it's like, again, that's why I think it's fun to go back to media, like, and just rewatch it, replay something, and just like, why was I so hard on this?
So of the time that you kind of got used to it, you were playing it. What's your take on Wind Waker? Where does it kind of not rank for you, but where does it work for you?
Majora's Mask is my favorite, but like Wind Waker, it's a good it's a very good one. Like I really do enjoy it. The Wii U version is probably a great way to play it, just because like, it has the quality of life stuff. It has like oh man, sailing is fun, but over time it just gets kind of annoying because like you go so slow at times. But the Wind Waker has like a speed sail. You just zoom, like fast forward.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic game. It's fun. Like cell shading took a little bit to get used to, because like that was just the new thing. But like once I did, I've really enjoyed. Like it holds up a lot more just because of the cell shading. Just design aesthetics versus like it's kind of like when stuff is like games. I said games now are trying to be as realistic as possible and all this stuff, but nowadays I really like something just fun and stylized, because that just that holds up in the end, because looking at Call of Duty, like COD 4, like, oh my gosh, it's the best kind of graphics, nothing's gonna top this. And it's like, looking at it now on the Xbox 360, it's like, whoa, this is aged.
It's not aged well. Were you a Wind Waker person?
I actually was. I had pre-ordered it, actually, and I'm kicking myself because I ended up trading it in for some other game, and I haven't been able to find a copy to play on my Wii ever since.
Oh man, those things are hard to come by, and they're expensive if I remember correctly.
Yep.
It would be lovely if a certain company, called Nintendo, would actually just put it on the Switch for all of us to buy, and so they can make an extra $30 million, because everyone's going to buy it.
Yeah, they put Skyward Sword out before they put Wind Waker out. I understand that people were bummed about like Toon Link, but it was a great game. It had some awesome mechanics. They really pushed the cell shading and everything. It was a fun game.
When you played it, and did you play it of its day? Because you said you had it, but then you traded it in. Did you actually get through it?
Yes, I did. I played through the whole thing. I really liked having all the different places that I could sail to, because it made the world feel a lot bigger. But I was just, when I was younger, I was dumb with trading in games and wheeling and dealing and getting 30 cents from GameStop for my game.
That's fun. I love the fact. I think we all did that. I mean, again, you get to a certain age, you're scraping money together for food for college. You're like, I'm not going to play this game anymore, not knowing that it'll be worth 4 times as much when you're, when our age, right? But I can see that. You don't remember what you traded it in for. That's the sad part.
I honestly couldn't tell you. I don't remember.
Just that. Oh well, man. Listen, it happens. So we need to get your gold cartridge back for Majora.
Yes,
and we'll never find your copy of Wind Waker, but hopefully one day the Big N will actually just allow us to play it conveniently on the Switch, and all will be right with the world. What was your take of the time? Because of its time, it was actually pretty controversial, as you alluded to, right? Toon Link, it wasn't dark and gritty. It wasn't Majora for sure. It was this Saturday morning cartoon, essentially. What was your take on it?
I think at the time I thought that Nintendo was trying to dial it back a little bit from the tone of Majora's Mask, and that's why they went cartoony with it. And they always seem to enjoy trying to reinvent Zelda games every single time they release a new one. So that's kind of what struck to me. But I think they were also trying to appeal to a younger audience, like you said, with a Saturday morning cartoon kind of feel. I really enjoyed it because I liked it. I liked seeing the expressions on Link's face because it made him feel more of a real character than just kind of bland, the occasional eyebrow twitch in Majora's and Ocarina of Time. But he actually had like full-on expressions, like when he was scared or when he was angry or when he was sneaking around the castles. I thought that was a step in the right direction for making him feel more like a real character.
I, too, was really struck by the character models and how expressive they are and how much attention to detail there looks to have been in this game.
Well, they had a couple of follow-up games on the 3DS that were in the same world as that, too. I think it was Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. And even on a 3DS, they still managed to have some amazing graphics and keep the same tone of the game. Like when you meet Zelda, when you meet all these different characters, they feel like real characters. And I'm glad that Nintendo kept doing that.
Wind Waker, I never played it as a kid. And I never played it as, I guess, at that age, a young adult.
Yeah.
So for this recording, I started playing it for the first time. And I'm about maybe a third of the way. I really don't know. I'm also using a guide for assistance just to kind of, again, I'm a dad and I got to get through these things quicker than other things. And I am personally shocked, and I'd love to hear your history with it first, but I think personally, I have not played a Zelda game yet that has that much flavor and color to it. And I'm really glad that I'm playing Majora right now because I'm seeing where some of these things came from. Like, I can definitely see ties from Majora to Wind Waker. My boy Tingle. I love Tingle.
Yeah.
Tingle rules. How could you not? I remember everyone making fun of Tingle. Remember, Tingle was the worst character. I remember that in those days.
He's great.
Now I think the world has come around on Tingle, understanding he's living his best life. And he's just, who could care less? Him in his tight green tunic.
Yeah.
So
people are just so much more willing, I think, to just embrace that kind of like weirdness. And people, I think, in the modern day are almost like envious of people who can just be themselves unabashedly.
I love it. And I think that actually speaks maybe to the evolution, hopefully, of people in general, where we are just more accepting of it, right? Hopefully. As a race, you know,
I hope so. Yeah.
Just more accepting of people being different and just living their lives the way they want to. So I don't know. I'm a big Tingle fan, but I wanted to let's just talk about your story with Wind Waker. How do you feel about it? When were you introduced to it? Did you play it of the time?
Yeah. So I played it when it came out. Pre-ordered it at GameStop. Did the whole shebang. My friend Cody and I would do this thing where we would trade games back and forth. Like we would strategize. Like we would say, okay, I'm buying this, you're buying that, because money was, we were young. We didn't have that kind of money to, throw around or whatever. So it was whenever you would get a little bit of cash in your pocket. We're teenage boys, so let's plan this out, man. Let's figure it out. While, you play Wind Waker for a month, I'll play Kingdom Hearts for a month or whatever. We're trading stuff back and forth like that. So I was on Wind Waker duty, essentially. I picked up Wind Waker and I played through it first. And it was one of those things where I gave it to him to borrow. And usually we would borrow for maybe a couple weeks, a month or something like that. I didn't get the game back for a year after I let him borrow it.
No.
And Yeah, and it became like kind of an awkward thing, and I kind of had to like put my foot down on it a little bit actually. And it actually became like a huge awkward thing for us, and like our friendship was Wind Waker specifically. But anyway,
Wow.
I remember playing it when it came out and feeling a little rushed, like a little bit like I never had the time I felt like to like sit and 100% it, because we were playing so much stuff at that time, and like we had this kind of like dichotomy with each other. There was a little bit of pressure for him, from him rather, because he wanted to play it. So, all right, are you done yet? Are you done? And then finally I give it to him, and he kept it for like a year. Like, are you kidding me?
Shameful.
So, yeah. Oh, I was so mad. I was so mad. It very nearly, it caused arguments.
Wow.
But anyway.
Yeah.
Finally, I get it back from him, and I was able to do like a full like 100% playthrough, and it was another one where I really enjoyed it like when it came out, and I remember being very taken by the art style of it, because with Zelda, I've always kind of just like there are very few franchises like this, but Zelda is a franchise where I'm on board, like I'm in. If there's a new Zelda game, I trust it. I'm gonna play it. It has always been my safe place. Zelda has always been my safe harbor. If there's something with the Zelda name, I don't care if it's a cel-shaded Wind Waker thing. I don't care if it's Triforce Heroes, where we're like talking about playing dress up and co-op and stuff. Like, I'm gonna play it. And I don't think there's ever been a bad Zelda game, Philips CDI games notwithstanding. If there's something with that branding, I'm gonna play it. So anyway, I remember playing that game and not absorbing a lot of the story my first way through, being taken with like the world and the visuals and the characters and stuff, but kind of feeling like I was going through the motions with it a little bit. So on that first playthrough, I kind of turned it over to him and I was like, yeah, it was good. I liked the music a lot and stuff like that. And then kind of wanting to go back in, feeling like I didn't get a full experience with it. Sure. And then after that like year away from it, getting to like reabsorb it the way I wanted to in the first place, was awesome, because then I did get to pick up on the things the game's trying to say. The game, I think, has more to say than people maybe give it credit for about growing up, leaving the past behind, the sort of like, changing over of the world. You know, people completely like lose sight of like, really it's a post-apocalyptic story, you know, and it's about sort of like recontextualizing your viewpoint of the world and like what the world should be after it's given this sort of like fresh start. It's about the passing of the old guard. Like, Ganon's motivations in this game are really not inherently evil. Like, he wants to bring the world back to the way it was, and now he wants to rule it, and it probably wouldn't be great news for everybody if that happened, but he's not like inherently evil on the face of it. He's like, look, I liked the old world. I liked it this way. Let's bring it back to this way, you know? And there's a lot to chew on with Wind Waker that I think many people sort of just like get hung up on the visuals or the personality or the music or whatever. But actually, there's a little bit more underneath the surface.
All right, man. Tell me, what's the story? What's your story with Wind Waker?
All right. Well, when my friend and I finally got that game, he got it first. I got a GameCube second. So most of my beginning experience was only at his house, only visiting. So a lot of it was me like kind of having to come back to it with more context, because I'd come over to his house. He'd be at Outset Island, leave, come the next day. He's like at Dragon Roost, leave, come the next day. He's at the and I don't know how he got there, right? So I'm just helping him along the way as he does stuff. But I just remember immediately being like, reading up previews before it came out through Game Informer, and just absolutely being like reading, like looking at all the images, cutting them out, pasting them on my wall as temporary wallpaper, because that's just what I did. It was fun to do.
Oh, cool.
And just gushing over its graphics, because I'm in third grade, second or third grade. That aesthetic is absolutely what I would want. I would bring me Saturday morning cartoon Zelda, absolutely, all day, every day. So I remember looking at that all the time. And then when we finally got the game, I watched him play it, and I'm like, I'm so jealous. I can't wait to get a GameCube. I don't know how I'm going to do it. We're like a one console every 2 years kind of family, so I'll see this in 2005, I guess. Didn't happen. Luckily, it didn't happen. There was a good Christmas that year. Got it. So I remember when we finally got to, you haven't played the game, but very early on, you go to Windfall Island, you rescue Tingle. And Tingle's item that he gives you for rescuing him is called the Tingle Tuner. And I know we talked about this the last time, but I will refresh you because I don't remember how much you remember. So the Tingle Tuner in that game is the Game Boy Advance. And the Game Boy Advance needs its link cable. You hook it up, and all of a sudden, you become essentially a player 2 for Link, which is awesome. You basically will use player 1. You'll use Link's stored up rupees, and those rupees will be what you use to like be able to bomb things. And I don't remember too much else other than the bomb thing because it's bombs. So basically you get, as long as he's good at collecting rupees, you are just bombing everything that even looks at you funny. And it's amazing.
That's amazing.
So we did that for a long time. And then when it finally was like, okay, I'm out of rupees, dude, or please stop. I need like rupees for this purchase. Please stop. I'd be like, okay, I'll watch you. And when I finally got the game myself and being able to soak it in with just everything that happened, I remember, other than Ocarina of Time, I remember crying very hard when I beat that game because it was over, and I didn't want it to be over. It was tough. It was really tough. Immediately hit new game to play that game in my underwear or in my pajamas, which is a great little like what do you call it? I guess reward that no other game has done yet in Zelda very well as far as I remember.
No, that's a neat memory, and I think one of the big things that stands out to me when you discuss that is that game was made for you. That game was made for you. It was made for kids, right? And although I shouldn't say it that way because that sounds dismissive of the game that it is, like, and people again love it now.
But ages, it's just easily appealing to children because of that. But obviously, like I wasn't ignorant to the sixth graders who were like, "This looks like booty. Yeah. Where's the realistic graphics that I want?"
Right.
And secretly, because I'm like wanting to be the cool kids. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. Where is the cool graphics? Go home and be like, I never want you to be anything but this.
Don't change.
Don't change. Never change.
Never change. It's interesting because again, when Wind Waker came out, was that 2000? When did Wind Waker? 3?
Yep.
Yeah, 2003. I was like 23. And that was an era also where I wasn't playing a lot of games. So I was trying to get my first job. I was just out of college. Like, there was a dead part of my gaming history. So that's probably why I didn't play Wind Waker. I just wasn't playing many games at the time. And for me, though, I probably would look at that, and even as a 23-year-old, I'm still not a crappy edgelord, 17-year-old, but I kind of suck. Yeah, I'm 23. We all kind of suck. Mm-hmm. But I probably looked at that and was like, oh, it's like cartoon baby graphics. I'm not into that, and discarded it. And a lot of people did of the era, and now too many did. And now, of course, it's beloved. It's a beloved entry into the series for that aesthetic. People have really latched onto that, and I wonder why time has changed on that. And I think as maybe because we're getting older, we can appreciate things more. We can look past the graphics and not have those expectations. I often wonder why that was. Like, why did we have that kind of just that vitriol towards it? When you, as a kid, looked at it and said, "Oh, that's a playable Saturday morning cartoon. That's freaking awesome."
I mean, it was everything that you would want. It even had you haven't played the game, but like if you kill something, it gives you like a Tom and Jerry thwap when you kill something. Like literally, like they almost like rip that sound, the thwap of like when someone gets like slapstick comedy hit.
It's great. I think that sounds amazing.
The best mini game in that game is basically kind of like a battleship, where you like trying to like discover where the enemies are, and you're trying to like hit and miss kind of thing. But every time you do it, the guy who's playing the game, who's like the game master or whatever you call it, who runs the shop, is like going like sploosh, sploosh. It's just it's meant to be like, this is great fun. Like it's unabashed fun.
Next up, Dan from Retro Logic shares his opinions, followed by Jodi, aka Quail, on Twitter, and then Andrew Craig, and then finally, longtime friend of the show, Games with Coffee, all share their first impressions of this amazing game. So I do want to spend some time also talking about Wind Waker. That is another game you cite as a favorite in the series. Tell me a bit about your experience playing Wind Waker.
Yeah, so I was not in the bandwagon of people who were disappointed by the art style when it was new. I was like, cool, this looks neat. Looks like a playable cartoon. Love the expressions on the faces. Love everything. The music like corresponds to your movements in battle. I'm totally down. I love big ocean games. Like I'm so super into this, So yeah, like, I mean, I was in from the beginning, and then it just kept getting better and better. I mean, it's got some of my favorite dungeons. Just the music while you're sailing makes sailing the opposite of tedious, like you feel like you're going on an adventure. You don't feel like you're just sitting there. You're you're like, you're going to do a thing as a brave little kid. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, I honestly don't see it. If anybody out there still hates Wind Waker, like, you're missing out on a grade A Zelda game.
What do you think makes Wind Waker a grade A Zelda game? If you had to pick like one aspect that kind of just pushes it above a lot of the titles, what would you say?
Man, so I think it is on par with your Ocarina of Time, Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, as far as like dungeon quality, overworld. We know the things that we love about Zelda. It hits all those notes. And the thing that rises it above the rest for me is the world that you're in has so much purpose. The ocean is part of the story. And that to me just kind of like made everything feel really cohesive from like a story gameplay perspective. And then also just like I mentioned before, the animations in this game are just so well executed and so well done. And I don't know. It's probably just like a very personal like thing, but I'm just all about that style of Zelda. Toon Link Zelda, like Toon Link is my guy. Like I love that aesthetic. I want Link to be a kid. Like I don't want him to be some badass adult. That's how I feel.
And I wonder if that comes from the original Zelda games, which were about exploring, about kind of almost childlike exploring, because the premise of Zelda is very, kid, my son, my 5-year-old, running around with a sword pretending to be a knight. Like that's what almost feels like to me, exactly. That kind of adventure. And when they put on the adult clothes and, like Twilight Princess, I think is okay Zelda game. I don't actually love that game. But when it gets, dreary and darker, I think a lot of the magic kind of fades. And I think, and to your point here, Wind Waker, at least from somebody who, as of this recording, has not played it, has that joy, has a bit of that joyfulness to it.
Well, and kind of what we were talking about, like with Link's Awakening, it's got the thin film of joy over a world that has been flooded and is now like a dystopian separate islands. Like we're all just kind of surviving, but it's been this way for generations. So this is just how we live. But you go under the water and there's an entire lost civilization. Like it's such a great like veil that you're playing as in Wind Waker. When you finally make your way down there, and you realize what you've been experiencing this whole time, like it's such a great reveal.
What was your first reaction to it when you bought it upon release?
Yeah, so my first reaction was a bit different because, like I said, only game I'd really played was Zelda 2. So this was quite different.
Yeah.
But like I always liked anime and that kind of stuff, so the cartooniness never bothered me. I know it bothers so many people back then, but I liked it. And it was actually I played the first island and it was fun, but it was when you opened up to be able to sail. It still hits me. That's just, it felt like the world opened up to you. Like you could now go anywhere you wanted and just take your time. And that was one of the first things I did. I basically sailed everywhere you possibly could.
You just sailed everywhere.
Before I even did the islands. Like I'd just do little excursions on islands, but sailed and filled out the map.
That's really cool. And because I have received a sail as well and now have that kind of open reign. The boat will tell you at certain points, hey, shouldn't really go here. Hey, hold on.
So, you sort of get guided a bit. So then you go and do that for a bit and then you go some more.
No, it's really cool. I totally get it. And I know some of the criticism of Wind Waker was also, it takes forever. Like the sailing.
It does.
Takes a while. But I don't know.
But it never bothered me.
Yeah. And I'm trying not to use the speed ahead. And I think I did it once because time reasons, but I don't know. There's something really fun about just kind of tossing on the waves and just shooting forward. There's
I thought
really
it was my last year of high school. So, you're not doing too much in school. I already knew what I was doing for college and everything. So that summer is what I played it, actually, right after I graduated. And I had the whole summer, so I spent a good chunk of the summer playing that and Metroid.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they bring everything over to the Switch,
hey, who knows, right?
Just fingers crossed.
Bring it all over. Please bring over Wind Waker, because I don't want to try to repair a Wii just to play it before the bulk of my Wind Waker episodes come out. I would like to actually get my hands on it and experience it.
Yeah, I hooked up the Wii U because my fiance had never experienced any Zelda games, and so hooked up the Wii U, popped in Wind Waker, and said, "Here's where we're starting."
Wow, but that was the first go.
That was the first one, just because that game is so inviting that it's when you'll understand exactly the moment I'm speaking about, and so many people who listen to this will know exactly the moment I'm talking about, when Link is on the catapult.
Okay, I heard in the background.
Oh, you heard my fiance laugh from the other room?
I sure did.
That awesome. Is the moment that me, who went into this game going, this isn't what I want Zelda to be, that was the moment that won me over.
Wow.
And that is the moment that wins everybody over. If you can get somebody to that point, they will stick with that game from then on.
That's cool.
And it's only about an hour and a half in.
Okay. Yep.
We're going to start this way back when I first got my GameCube. And this was when I was 16 years old, so this would be 2003. That's right. So I got a GameCube for Christmas. It was for me and my brother. And with this GameCube, it came with 2 games. One was Metroid Prime, which I really want to start playing the remastered game right now, but
if you can get your hands on the physical copy,
I have digital. One. I have.
Oh, you do?
I got.
See,
I
There you
hunted
go.
down for it. And I got it. I'm like, nope, first thing. Anyways, segue. And the second one was the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition, which came with Zelda 1, Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and a demo for Wind Waker. And on the demo was you were able to explore the Forsaken Fortress and also take part in a little sailing excursion from Windfall Island to Dragon Roost Island. Just do like the first, maybe about first 30 minutes to get to the dungeon. And then actually tackle the Dragon Roost Island dungeon itself. So like three different little scenarios, each of them timed. And that was my first exposure into Wind Waker. So that was roughly around the same time of the release, maybe about a year after its release, I would say. I think.
Sounds about right, yeah.
And then subsequently, this would have been about a year and a half after. No, not a year and a half, a year. It would be a year after. So where I live, there used to be a giant flea market. And in that giant flea market, you have like shops of all kinds, from like outfits, jewelry, bootleg movies. But the best stalls, for me, obviously, were the video game stalls. And
naturally.
And these stalls were just chock full of just retro games. This is before the big, the big retro gaming boom that happened like in the mid 2010s or so. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's like wall to wall of like classic games, like NES, SNES, and stuff like that. And there was a box. I specifically remember this. It was just a cardboard box, and in that cardboard box was a bunch of GameCube games. And I'm like cycling around them and like looking at it, and there's like a copy, a used copy, of course, but it was a copy of Wind Waker. Actually, let me grab that. Let me grab the copy itself. Right here it is. I paid $39.99 for it. Wow. I still have the price tag on it.
Wow.
And it was, the case is damaged a little bit. The label is a little bit crusty, but sure. I mean, it's the original black label. Nice. The original case for it and everything. Paid $40 for it. Took it home. Me and my brother started playing it, and it was magical.
Now, before we head to Hill Valley and steal ourselves a fancy schmancy DeLorean, it's time to thank my patrons. Starting off with Theodore LaBarbara, Games with Coffee, Patrice Millette, The Let's Play Princess, BT Goebbels, Tim Knowles of The Elitist, Julian of Nerds Without Pants, Seth Sturgill of the All In Podcast, Dan of Retro Logic, Ryan Payne of the Gamers Week podcast, and finally, the one and only, the ever debonair and smashing Mr. Pete Harney. He gets extra words. He's my brother-in-law, so it's family. That's how that kind of works. Just kidding, of course. Maybe I'll say like weird things for the other people. Maybe that'd be a fun thing to do for the rest of my patrons. If you want to be mentioned on this show and had weird things said to you, then by all means go to patreon.com/a gamer looks at 40. Check out our 3 tiers, and if one of them appeals to you, by all means sign up. We would love to have you. Next up, the Lord Reverend D, Seth, and then Jodi all return to talk about one of the biggest parts of this game. It's not even the combat or the story, it's simply traversing the open waters of this relatively empty, yet strangely alive world. I love the sense of exploration that felt very original Zelda to me, where you're kind of off on this quest, you're not sure what's around any corner, and you're just stumbling into islands, going on the island, seeing what's there. Oh, I can get a heart piece, or oh, I can't do this yet. I need an item. That scratches a big itch for me in games in general. What was your take on that? That real sense of exploration, as opposed to like a hub world, which Ocarina and Majora certainly were.
it felt a lot more like a sandbox game where I could do whatever I wanted for the most part. I mean, I granted I didn't have all the items to get to all of the islands, or I didn't have the right songs or whatever, but I still felt like I had a lot more options open to me. So maybe I didn't want to go and mess with a dungeon. Maybe I just wanted to go and fight pirates or do some more exploring of other islands. I liked that feel. It was more open and more realistic to me for an adventure game.
Absolutely. And I think sailing adds an interesting element to it as well, where you're not just walking or running, you are really at the behest of the wind. And of course, having the ability to change that wind is just vital. I mean, you have to have that. I can't imagine that game if you couldn't do that, which builds a lot of intrigue into puzzles. And I just think the environments really serve this game well. And again, probably better than any other Zelda game I've played, where the environment dictates play and influences play in a very impactful way.
Well, there were several times I forgot which direction I had the wind going, and so I'm wondering, why am I stopping? Oh, that's right, I got the wind blowing against me. Oops. Bust out the Wind Waker, start conducting again. It's like that's one of the things that you have to pay attention to when you're sailing, or just in general, is you got to know where the wind is blowing and which direction you need to go.
So I just think there's some really cool theming there. I mean, I think as a Zelda game, Wind Waker, for me, when you talk about you had mentioned earlier that you don't really like dungeons. I'm curious how you're going to feel about the dungeons in this one, because for me, these are probably the weakest dungeons of the series. I don't know, like I've heard some other people say that, but for me, the dungeons are like very, very linear. And so they're not the kind of dungeons you can like sit and chew on, but maybe you'll see that as a good thing. It's funny. I played the first one, and that's the one where you get shot into a cannon. That's that. Yeah. And that's that wide sprawling. I don't think you're even meant to like do anything successful there. And I took on was it a fire? Yeah. I took on like a fire dungeon. Mm-hmm. I agree. I think they're fine. I didn't like the first one because I felt hopelessly lost. Everything felt the same, and I had a hard time navigating. Right. But the first, that was fine. I really didn't have any strong feelings about it, and that's more because I was going through with the guide, and that of course helps that. But I don't even think I needed it, to be honest with you. When I was playing through it, it was more of just a convenience thing. So I don't have strong opinions on it yet. I will when it's definitely very simple. There's no, water temple. No, which is a whole other different thing. Are you playing it on original hardware, or are you playing the HD version?
I am playing the original game on my Steam Deck.
Oh, okay, cool.
I'm emulating. So I'm playing the original version. So I'm not playing the HD remake.
The reason I ask is because I don't know if you'd heard of this or not, but the HD remake did some actual significant gameplay changes. Primarily, there's a kind of going into the final stretch of the game. There's this big collectathon sort of thing that has been maligned by the fan base. I actually didn't mind it. I'm the type of person, I really enjoy just the act of sailing in that game. Mm-hmm. So speaking vaguely, there's this kind of going into the home stretch of the game, you have to go to a bunch of different islands and collect these pieces that you need to kind of go into the end game. And there's a lot of them. So you're doing a lot of exploring and sailing and stuff. A lot of people found that tedious. I really enjoyed it. And so I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on that, because in the HD version of the game, they not only completely, I think they made it a third of the amount of pieces that you need for that quest. They also did the swift sail or something like that. So the sailing is twice as fast, which for me was actually a downgrade. For me, it was but I like this. I'm the type of person in Breath of the Wild, I don't fast travel. I'm the type of person, I like to just really live in these worlds. I hoof it. I walk around or I get on a horse or something like that. I don't want to fast travel. I want to walk to the place and explore the world. I want to be on the water. And so this is what I'm here for,
It's interesting. I've done some sailing. I haven't done a ton yet. I think the sailing is really fantastic. So far is the weirdest moment of sailing was running into a giant squid or octopus, and sucked and having no verbs to do anything about it. I'm just throwing things at it, and it's just laughing at me. And like I guess I'm just going to get eaten up by this octopus. I really like it. I like the sailing a lot. I will admit I have used the fast forward feature on these long expanses where there's not much going on. But I kind of agree with you. Depends on the game. Breath of the Wild, I walked everywhere. I really did. I walked everywhere. If I'm playing a Fallout game, I am walking nearly anywhere because I know that en route to my destination, I'm going to get Fallout experience. I'm going to run into cool little side stories. Something cool is going to happen along the way. What do you think about Wind Waker really connected with you? Really pushed you forward to play that game nearly that entire summer?
The sailing's a big part of it because I grew up on a boat. Like I live in Newfoundland, Canada, so boating, we do a lot of it, fishing and that. So that's part of it, and the other part is just the open. I had gotten out of a lot of gaming. Like I had gone to a lot of more action games for a while. Wasn't so much into I'm back into RPGs now, and I was as a little kid. But as a teen, I wasn't so much. So this really was an adventure again. And it was like going back, and I know Zelda's not an RPG, and I know, I'm not trying to say it is, but that adventure, that whole thing of having a world that you can now go and be a part of, it's just, it really resonates with me that you can go and be in the little islands and that. It's just, here's the little contained, like the Deku Island, one of the first ones, but I still love that island.
It's cool.
Going there. It's so cool. And it started getting me into the lore of Zelda, because I never really was. But that and Twilight Princess, especially after I finished Twilight Princess, I got so much into the lore with it. And I got big into the Hyrule Historia and all that I know other people get annoyed with. But I loved it at that point. It got me into it.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. I think that, again, you probably heard we discussed lore a bit. And I just love the fact it's there for people who dig it.
Yeah.
And I like the fact of recurring characters, too, in Wind Waker. Again, like your Beetle and other people who show up. And I'm like, hey, I recognize you from other things. And it's nice because, especially like Beetle, I mean, he showed up in Wind Waker. I'm like, I know, like a buddy. Yep. Like, hey, pal, how are you?
Exactly.
There's really something neat about that.
I don't know if you're at the, because you said you're still going through it. Are you at the point where you got the oracles yet, or?
No.
Okay.
I'm still. I think I'm almost done with that with Deco Tree with the leaf.
Okay.
I think I'm almost done with that.
There is a point you got to get a couple oracles. I won't get into it. Spoilers, but. When you see who they're descended from, it brings back these callbacks that I didn't know who they were, and I had to go look it up. So it was pretty cool.
Oh, neat. Interesting. Okay. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. I'm slowly but surely working my way through it. And again, it's a joy. So you mentioned that you said grew up on a boat or around boats, I'm assuming.
Around boats. A lot of fishing.
Yeah. That's cool. So I think that's really interesting, that connection for you. Kind of you understand, I suppose, what it's like to be on a boat on the open sea. Again, this is all assumptions, and I can put it.
Well, yeah, it is. Never sailed, but rowing and motorboats and knowing the winds. You got to know winds with a boat, and I found that really fun trying to figure out the winds and try to sail and do your tacking to get around. Yeah.
You said tacking. I don't know what tacking is.
Yeah.
No. That's cool. I think it lends a little. I don't know, some flavor to the conversation. That's pretty neat. That Wind Waker was able to capture at least a bit of that.
Yeah. It seems really realistic. Like I said, I haven't sailed before, but it seems so realistic the way it is. And the way you can go into the wind and all that kind of stuff. Even it really hit me. And I still love that part of it.
Like Wind Waker, there's always an island to point yourself to. Yep. Oh, let me see what's over there. Oh, that's an island, it's a volcano. That's great. Oh no, there's a whirlpool. Oh no, there's a giant octopus sucking me in. How do I get rid of this thing? I have no idea. Dead. But that stuff's so good. Like that emergent, hey, you're now stuck in this whirlpool. If you don't know what you're doing, game over. Or not game over. They spit you out someplace.
And I think that's probably one way that Skyward Sword actually is better than Twilight. It at least it reopened it, right? Like you could fly around. You could go all kinds of places and some really interesting places to find while flying.
But there's so much more to this game than just sailing around. And even again, fighting bosses and puzzles. The characters really make this game come alive and feel exciting and expressive in a number of different ways. To talk about that is Justin, followed by Seth, followed by Mr. Coffee, and then Jodi wraps up the conversation. You kind of hit on something with Wind Waker, that visually it holds up beautifully because it's so simple. It's kind of like the old 16-bit games and 8-bit games, etc. It was simple and effective, and it still works today. Like Final Fantasy VI still looks beautiful 25 years or whatever after it was released, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think the same can be said for games like Wind Waker, which again, simplistic, but very complex. I think, again, in my playthrough, I was struck with how beautiful like the facial animations are, how expressive Link is. Yeah.
I love his like sneaky face. That's like my favorite one.
Link's sneaky face. I love when like he'll pick something up and he has this little grimace as he picks it up. And the designers of the game did not have to do that. They didn't have to do that. That's something I just noticed out of the corner of my eye when I was picking up a block or a pot or something. But they did it because that's what the character would do if they were to pick up a pot. And it's such a good beat and note. I think it's really beautiful in that way.
Oh yeah, I love games. I love games with like little attentions to details and stuff like that. Just certain little like animation things. Like I wish I could think of some good examples, but like just certain like. I mean, it's kind of like today's video games. You can't even shoot in the dirt. Like, I mean, like, even like GoldenEye, when you shoot in the walls, you see bullet holes. Like, I feel games don't do that anymore.
They've traded a lot of. They've traded. You're right. It's a very interesting situation and place where games are now and where they were.
I love any story, and this ties into something I mentioned earlier, but any like Zelda story where Link is like a kid, and any story that kind of like, in this one in particular, is so much about like the sort of new generation, the sort of new world or whatever, that like seeing it through the lens of these kids, I think makes it all the more impactful. And it's something that you sort of like are reminded of constantly throughout the course of the game. Like, oh wow, like no, these are kids, doing this stuff. And it almost reminds me a little bit. I don't know if you've ever played Earthbound.
Oh yeah.
But Earthbound has those like similar vibes a little bit, where it's like these kids that all of a sudden are burdened with this, with this purpose, with this like all of a sudden they have to be the ones to take on all of this, and they have to be the ones to make these decisions. And I think this game like tackles that really, really effectively. And there are a couple of moments, not to overtly spoil anything, like you described with the grandma or whatever in the beginning of the sort of forlorn, the sort of like acceptance, but unwilling acceptance. There are several moments like that, in addition to moments of silliness or moments of grand, epic combat. This game kind of has it all.
Absolutely. And so are you saying that games like, I guess, Wind Waker, it's kind of like the Stand By Me or Stranger Things of the video game universe?
Big time. Yeah,
because it has that feel, right? And you mentioned about being like embodying a child or a kid. I think that's really is very impactful, because I think when this game was released and I was, what year was this now when this was released? I want to say
2002, I think.
2002. Okay. Yeah. So 2002, I was 22. So I was in that kind of emotional state where this was kind of past me a bit. I was talking to my 6-year-old today about Pokemon. I was like, son, do you realize Pokemon, I was 16 when Pokemon was released. Like that. Do you realize I was in high school when Pokemon was released, and I never played Pokemon. It was I was kind of aged out of that a little bit.
Sure.
And now, of course, he's like, oh, I was at a friend's house today and we played Pokemon United or something. I'm like, dude, I love the fact that they're still into it. But anyway, when I was 20 something, there's no way I would have wanted to embody a child.
Right.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I just wasn't interested in Wind Waker at that age. That just wouldn't have appealed to me. I got my first job. I'm doing adult things now. I'm paying rent. But now as like a 40 something who has kids,
right.
And I see my son who's 6 running around with his friend from across the street, just doing adventures, going on these adventures. Today, they're like, oh, we're going to do Ninja Adventure number 2. This is chapter 2 of our Ninja Adventure. It's like, sweet, chapters. That's
that.
Awesome. Yeah. I can now look at that and say, oh, wow, I really like that. I don't want to be a kid. Please don't misconstrue that, because I think that's actually, I think wanting to be a child and being nostalgic about it are two very different things.
Very different things, yeah.
Very, very different things. But being able to appreciate that in that way, and I think that's why it is hitting me in this really joyful thing. And kids, they go on adventures. This sort of adventure in Wind Waker that my son and his friend would make up. Right. That's kind of how I feel about it. Right. We're going to sail on the ocean and the boat's going to talk to us and they're going to stick us in a cannon and shoot us over into the dungeon.
Yeah.
It's just, I think there's a lot of that.
And isn't it interesting thematically that when the goddess Hylia flooded the world and effectively buried the old world because the hero of time was no longer there to save it, isn't it interesting thematically that same action is what in this game creates this wide open field of possibility? It's the fact that she flooded the world has now created the Great Sea, has now created this thing that you're going to explore for dozens of hours. And it's possibility in every corner. And I can go to this island or that island and I can go wherever I want. I'm a kid. The leash is off,
Right. I think there's a lot of emotional beats to it. And as far as that concept of wanting to bring back the old way of things or the old world, like you said, that's a positive motivation for an enemy or for a villain or an antagonist. That's what I was looking for. But a positive motivation for an antagonist was at that time still kind of hard to find in video games.
Right.
It wasn't nowadays we're finding better antagonists in games and they have better motivations rather than I want to take over the world, that kind of thing. So I think it's interesting that that's the direction they went. I was struck early on with, again, the emotional beats. And again, I fell in love with the characters initially.
Right away.
Initially, all those.
Yeah.
And that initial island where the kid with the snot in his nose and
yes.
the guy who's dressed like some weird Elvis impersonator just dancing by a grave, if I remember, or a bench or something. And he's just there dancing. All of those just beats and those characters are really wonderful. But there was 2 things I remember striking me immediately. Number 1, the expressiveness of the characters and
Big
how
time.
I think in this game, more than any other game, certainly before or since they captured emotion just beautifully. I mean, I feel like it's a very carefully crafted game where there was so much attention to detail that it's remarkable.
Yeah, I love the facial expressions to both dramatic and comedic effect. Like the
Absolutely.
facial expressions that Link and like Tetra can make are great. I mean, even just that first moment that on Outset Island where, I love how the like inciting incident really of this game is just I need to save my sister. Like I need to, leave home, save my sister or whatever. And when like your aunt or grandma, I think it's supposed to be his grandma, I don't know. But when she hands over like the tunic of the hero of time and everything, like it's sort of like a burden, like it's sort of like a wow, like kind of thing. Like it's not even like, it's interesting because the game opens up with this reality that we're living in. This is a reality wherein the hero of time failed, where this big like calamity happened and there was no hero to save it. And so that's why the world is underwater, is because the goddess Hylia had to just flood the entire planet, you know? Right. And I just think that they like right away they established that with that kind of like somber music that eventually like fades into the main theme, which is amazing. Yeah, so I think that they get a lot of mileage out of like this kind of cartoony anime almost look to it. Yeah, great expressiveness, probably more so than any other Zelda game, I would say.
I would say more than even like a Breath of the Wild or
big time.
Certainly like a Twilight Princess. I mean, I 100% agree. In that moment, and I think it's his aunt, I can't remember, grandma, aunt, or that whoever that figure was, when she hands that over, when she finds out he's leaving,
right,
and he says, "I gotta leave. My sister is gone. I gotta get her." She looks just pained, just forlorn, and that hit me. And that's an early moment where it hit me, and I said, "Oh, wow, okay, this is not just a silly little romp, even though it definitely could be. There's going to be stuff here." And that's when it struck me like, wow, there's a craft here and there's stuff going on. And again, I'm not all the way through yet, but maybe we'll part 2 this one as well. But yeah. I do, it's just something I think pretty extraordinary to create that kind of feeling, especially maybe in that era. And with that art style, like you said, allowing for that, allowing for that cartoonish expressiveness. One thing that really struck me because I've started playing Wind Waker before I started Majora. And then once I started having the Majora conversations, I realized very quickly I need to finish Majora before I continue these conversations. It just felt like I had to based on the interviews I was doing. But at the time I hadn't played Majora yet, and I had gone through like from Ocarina, which the world feels alive, there's characters and there's interesting personalities, to Wind Waker, which is nothing but interesting personalities and joy and vibrancy. Even just Windfall Island is full of these interesting, strange characters. Are there any characters in the game that really speak to you and stand out to you as kind of emblematic of what Wind Waker is trying to do as a whole? And just the ones that you connect with on a personal level.
Oh man, that is a good question. I think definitely Prince Komali. You can kind of really relate to his situation where he's on the cusp of, growing up and getting his wings, but at the same time too, he doesn't want to. He wants things to stay the same. It's also emblematic of how he clutches the Din's Pearl, which is a memento of his grandmother who recently passed away. So, yeah, he was an interesting character to deal with. The Great Deku Tree was was hilarious because it's like the same one from back all the way in Ocarina of Time, and you're like, wait, what? you're still here.
And it's so silly, but still really seeped in things that are real. And that's kind of one of the big balances I love about Wind Waker so far is. A lot of it's so silly, like character-wise. I've said this in every interview, so apologies to listeners for me repeating the same thing 15 times. But there is this one character. I don't even know what his deal is yet. But he, on Windfall Island, he's in like a Elvis suit, dancing by a great... Yes! I want to hang with that guy. That's the guy I want to hang with. Like, what's your deal, my friend?
The man loves the sun. I guess that's his deal, and he's trying to show his appreciation by swinging his hips.
That's it. And, hey, listen, what better way to show your appreciation for basically anything than shaking your hips? I mean, let's be honest. Okay, I think that's a good way to look at life.
Agreed.
But there's even like the kid with the snot bubble, and you walk into this world, and it's so alive and vibrant. And while I don't think it has the shades of gray that Majora does, and again, I'm not through the whole game, obviously, so I can't speak to it 100%, where Majora is a game where everybody is just dealing with their impending doom the best way they can. This game, it feels like they're on the other side of doom, and they've now they're living their lives in, positive or negative ways, but it feels so very alive, and it shook me how vibrant the world was.
Yes.
And how expressive the characters are, and that attention to detail, I'm going to go right back to it, is so present in this game.
Oh yeah, of course. And it's just mind-blowing how well they've written all these characters. Tetra, actually, that's another character I should have mentioned first and foremost. It's just the story of this little pirate girl who I don't think you've gotten that far yet, so I will not spoil it, but this little pirate girl who thinks she's just this big shot, just running around ordering a bunch of like older dudes what to do and stuff like that. But like, she is just great. She's just like a really vibrant, really spirited character. I really adore her. She is actually one of my favorite characters in Wind Waker.
Who are some of the characters that you really latched onto in that game?
I loved I can't remember what they're called. Not Zora, because I was amazed there was no Zora in this.
Yeah, that's true.
But the flying guys, who are actually descended from the Zora, which is so cool.
Yes, the flying
I can't.
the
Riku?
birds.
Or
I think that's right. Hang on.
something like that. I can't remember exactly. But like them and the postmaster, one of them, I really liked him.
Oh, the postmaster. Yeah. Pretty
And
good.
I really loved the island, like what's it called? Windmill Island?
Yes,
The main island, right?
The main central one where you start off at. Yeah.
The pigs. The pigs were so much fun.
Wrangling pigs is really fun in that game. And I love how it tells you, you have to sneak up. No, just roll into them. I mean, just rolling into them.
Roll
'cause I know
quickly
Zelda. I know Zelda. Come on, just roll into them. You'll pick them up just fine.
Yeah. That's what's amazing. 'Cause I played a good bit of this game, and my nephew played it with me, and he's 10 years younger than me. And that's what he spent all his time doing, was wrangling pigs and shooting them with the arrows. I remember I got the light arrows like way late in the game, and he took my light arrows and started shooting the pigs with the light arrows, just because it'll tick them off as soon as you shoot them with that.
As you would expect, as you would expect, for sure.
I don't think he ever left Windmill Island the entire time he was playing.
That's funny. You can spend a lot of time. There's so much flavor, and that's one of my favorite things about Wind Waker. It's got it's dripping with flavor and charm. I mean, every character is, early on in this series, we were talking about Link as a character, and a lot of the conversation was, well, he's not expressive. He's just kind of a blank slate. Not in Wind Waker. I feel bad for saying that because I hadn't played it, and within an hour of Wind Waker, you're like, oh my gosh, Link is a genuine character, probably for the first time.
Yeah, he's like so expressive, just his face. Like, he might not talk, but it's still, he says lots without talking.
Absolutely. There's one little animation that really like cemented it for me, and it's tiny, but when he picks up a heavy block, he kind of struggles.
Yep.
He kind of like grimaces, like, ugh, and then picks it up. And that's an animation the creators didn't need to put in. Like, you don't really need to put that in. Yep, just could have picked that up. No one would have known any better. No one would have noticed. It would have been fine. But the fact that they cared so much about that character of Link that they inserted that into play, that's awesome. That's extraordinary.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. It's just they really did everything they could to make it memorable. I love the fight to get your sister back. But you did see the giant bird that took her at the beginning. Fighting that is one of my favorite fights in that game.
It's funny that encounter was really challenging. I couldn't quite wrap my head around what to do with it. And I am thinking of the right thing.
Yeah.
Is it the bird? No, I'm thinking of the very first large encounter, the very first boss, the big giant beetle, big bug or whatever creature is.
Yeah.
And you got to drop the roof on its head.
On its head. That was tricky. My nephew, he helped me do that. He helped me notice that the things up by you could shoot them.
I ran around that dopey thing trying to hit I am a 40-year-old man running in circles around this thing, getting wrecked. Like, what in God's name am I supposed to do? I'm looking around. I'm trying to find something to jump up to, hookshot platform, smash. I had to look it up. Again, I have no shame in looking things up. And then it says, oh yeah, you have to like pull that little thing down. So I'm thinking like, imagine that for a kid. I don't know how we figured these things out. That's your first boss. Like,
yeah,
that should be hit 3 times in the eyeball with your,
normally
with your
the
hook.
first boss is the easy one, right? But
right, like
I think they were really
easy...
trying to show you can do different stuff in this game.
And I think that's really impressive. And what I learned through that is, oh, this game is really going to encourage creative solutions to problems. Yeah. This game is not going to be quite like the other Zelda games where, again, hit it in the eye 3 times, or, maybe it's a little tricky. Bosses as puzzles are always really fun for me. Yeah. So it required me to change my thinking on it.
And pretty much every boss has some puzzle in this game. There's something in every boss, which is pretty cool.
That is very cool. I like the I like that aspect. Again, it's very not Zelda.
Yeah.
Because again, Zelda can tend to be just relatively straightforward with bosses. So yeah, I'm really loving Wind Waker. I have to finish it before the episode, before I talk to more people about it. But the island is in sight, the seagulls are at our back, the music has swelled, and our sails are full. It is time to bring this podcast home by talking about a number of just different elements of the game that have inspired us or enlightened us, or a little bit of both. Coffee returns to talk about why the game connected with him and why Child Link is actually a really good choice. Seth talks a bit about the music and just the world underwater and the themes developed there. Justin brings up the third spot, talking about why the game works for him in that very special way. And then finally, Dan from Retro Logic brings us home with where we started. Why did people look at this game and didn't like it from the very beginning? One of the things you mentioned was the smoke, kind of the curling smoke. That really speaks to the attention of detail, because boy, oh boy, this game is just dripping with detail.
Yes.
And I love that detail because it really makes the world for me come alive.
That's right. It's true. Despite the fact that you're stuck on a boat and lands are so far apart from one another, which is actually really neat, kind of like a really neat loading effect. You know how like some games they try to avoid using like loading screens and stuff like that?
Sure.
Zelda was like, let's just drop everybody on a big giant ocean and use the ocean as your loading screen.
That's funny.
But
totally.
Oh, the point I was making actually is with regards to the level of detail. It's not only just on the graphical and visual styles, it's also on the expansion of what happens next in the Zelda series. Because as you know from Ocarina of Time and even from Majora's Mask, the timeline has been bifurcated. Split, as it will.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The first game to explore this split occurs from the adult timeline. So this is post-adult timeline when Link defeats Ganon, Zelda and the Seven Sages seal Ganon into the Sacred World, but supposedly he gets out thousands of years later, and the people pray for a miracle. Miracle ain't gonna come, so the goddesses decide, like, all right, turn on the taps, let's flood the world. We can't let him escape, so yeah. We're just gonna soak this place up. Everybody get to the high ground.
Yikes! Yeah, right. Wow.
Which is really dark. The way they set that up, it's like, okay, yeah, this is a story from long ago, but when you think about it, it's like, holy smokes, you're gonna basically Noah's Ark the entire the entirety of Hyrule.
How biblical! I mean, yeah, it's pretty. It's very interesting that it has those shades for sure, and I am looking forward to kind of digging into that a lot more as it progresses. Yeah, for sure. But back to the detail, and it's such a Zelda thing too, to utilize better hardware for little touches. Mm-hmm. Like, again, designers don't need to do that. If they had never done that, one thing that really struck me early on was when Link lifts up a heavy item, he grimaces.
Yes.
Like, yeah, and he lifts up, or when he's speaking to, I think it's his aunt or his grandmother, I think at the very beginning when he sets off on the adventure and she's lamenting that he's leaving, like which is so emotional and heartbreaking. The look on her face is, just heartbreaking. The designers didn't need to do that, but they utilized this hardware and these extra resources to create these beautiful touches of detail that just bloom this world out in a really entrancing way.
And it also set a precedent as well too.
Sure.
Thinking about it now, between Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Wind Waker, of the three, Wind Waker really started using expression as a way to tell a story. I mean, the aforementioned games, Ocarina and Majora's Mask, they were limited by the engines of their time, like by the systems of their time. Yep. But the GameCube really took advantage. Like the Zelda team really took advantage of the GameCube's hardware, to convey a story by showing, not telling.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great way of putting it. Majora, for as emotional as it is, it rides on the writing, right? And the writing is spectacular. But yeah, Wind Waker, it's really treating games as that visual medium in a way that I don't think Zelda had done before.
A cinematic experience.
Yeah, exactly, right. And even beyond that, cinematic is a good way of putting it, but even just expressing that emotion, like you said, and again, showing it as opposed to telling it. The way you put it was perfect. It's showing instead of telling, which, as anybody who's done any sort of writing or storytelling will tell you, is one of the number one rules.
Not to toot my horn.
Not to speak too highly of myself. I do have this whole novel-length thing that I wrote.
42 chapters, probably starting the next 40 something in a bit. Yeah.
Awesome, man. So Wind Waker, obviously one of those, again, tentpole situations, and just one of those tentpole video games for sure in the series. What about it captured you? There's a lot to love about Wind Waker, and I always find it very interesting about Wind Waker because what came before it, right? Because Majora came before it. Majora, obviously, this very dark, pretty intense, very personal story game, which I think took a lot of people by surprise, especially after Ocarina. And then you had the big E3, which we all have seen the video of countless times, of adult Link fighting things, and he's on the horse and the fire and Ganon, and then Miyamoto comes out with the sword and shield in hand and everyone cheers. And then the next game is a Saturday morning cartoon, cell shaded, corny at the time looking Link. So what about you? What captured you about it at someone who is, I guess at this point, 17?
16, 17.
As a teenager, right? What captured you about it? Because I think a lot of people in my world, at least, I was older at that point, probably in my 20s. But a lot of teenagers I spoken to or knew, they weren't too keen on it. They wanted adult, edgy Link.
Yeah, I understand that sentiment, but for me, I really liked the cell shaded graphics. It's just, I don't know. I guess it's the cutesy charm of it. It was very charming. The character design was very diverse. The environments that will actually, what really drew me in to Wind Waker, especially when I was playing the demo, was how they handled the graphical elements. It's not just like okay, here's a good example. It's the smoke. How they handle the smoke. It's not just like regular smoke. It's like this curling animated mass of stuff, right? It's very difficult to explain how I see it in my head versus getting it out and through my mouth hole. But just the way how they animated things in that cel-shaded universe, it felt quirky, it felt charming. Yes, this was a younger Link. It was not an adult Link, not the Link that we deserve, not the Link that we wanted, but honestly, it's the Link that we deserve.
Sure.
Because most, if not all, Legend of Zelda games always had a young, childlike Link handling dangerous situations. And not to say that Wind Waker itself is not dark. I mean, behind all of its really cute charm and really adorable art style, the cel-shaded graphics, the cute-looking enemies, there's a lot of dark elements in Wind Waker that, you know, it really goes unnoticed unless you like start peeling away the edges and you're like, oh, okay, that's really creepy at times.
Another thing I've always noticed, and again, graphical, we've talked about the graphics. I think the sound design in Wind Waker is extraordinary. And sound and music in Zelda games are always great. That's not a big surprise. But Wind Waker in particular, because like you said, you spend a lot of time on that boat, just cruising the waters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looking for things out in the horizon. Again, my favorite things about games is just moving along, seeing a thing, going there, checking it out, discovery. That's what I'm really here for. And Wind Waker does that very well. But man, the music in this game is really sublime.
Yes.
Seriously, it's incredible.
The ocean theme is it just screams, it exudes adventure. Like when you hear that swelling orchestral rise with the horns and like that steady drum beat, it is just really a magical time when you're just sailing on a boat and you see treasure in the distance there. Like, hey, let's go over there. There's a submarine over there. Let's see what that's all about. There's a bunch of random dudes here. I wonder if they have advice for me. Look, a fish. Feed it some food.
Feed the fish. Yeah, it's really amazing. And what I love about it too is how everything musically and sonically in the game ties into the gameplay really, really well. It's integrated beautifully with the gameplay. Again, I've said this 100 times in these interviews already, but the moment I realized, you know, I'm approaching an island, the music swells, the wind is sweeping, the seagulls approach, and like you said, it's this spirit of adventure. I gasped. I went, oh, this is amazing. Let's go. Let's go do something. It's a really
adventure.
Let's go on an adventure. Just that combination is thrilling and something that was very surprising to me.
Yes, indeed. Another thing about sound design that I like, the various noises, the various sound effects. Link, his little cries and his little shouts of joy and surprise, and it's like it's so funny and so like it's adorable in a sense.
It is adorable.
One of my favorites. Oh, you'll like this when anytime you slide on ice and you just let go and he'll do like a little stagger. It's like he does that. He's like Yeah, and if you run in the opposite, sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but if you run on the ice and then you turn around, run in the opposite direction long enough, he'll slip and fall on his face, and he'll be like, ah!
It's so cute, and
it's so funny. It just gets me every time.
I do want to just touch on one thing, and I haven't really done this a lot in the other episodes, mainly because there's an overarching thing that it's just great, is the music.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The music, I think, in Wind Waker thus far is probably among my favorite, with, I think, Link's Awakening actually might be my full stop favorite, which is weird to say considering it's like, 4-bit / 8-bit Game Boy game, but
I was going to say that's interesting because
they're
very different schools of thought. Like the composer of Link's Awakening, I believe, was Kazumi Totaka, who is very famous for how simplistic his like melodies are, and Link's Awakening is great because it does so much with so little. Just in general. But like Wind Waker is the polar opposite. It is like maximalist. Like it's lush. It's so lush. Yeah. It is like world instruments, like crazy, like different vibes, bagpipes and things, and like wind flutes and like all kinds of crazy sitar work and stuff. Like there's a ton of like fascinating little instruments and just layered sound because like, and it kind of, the way the game doles that out is really interesting too, because when it opens with the most Koji Kondo song that ever Koji Kondoed with Outset Island, which is just this plucky doot 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 doot. You know, it's just totally Koji Kondo all over the place. And then when you actually get out, like into the world, the soundtrack becomes so much more like varied. Basically every like location that you go to has got, even like Dragon Roost Island sounds incredibly different from the forest theme or like whatever. Like there's this is a phenomenal soundtrack. Really good.
And I gotta say, the first time I hit the boat and it lets you go out, and and the game's very good about kind of gating you for the most part into where you got to go until it opens completely up. But the first time I got in that boat, I hit the water, the seagulls approach, the soundtrack swells to this big heroic theme. I literally exclaimed. I went, oh, I literally exclaimed, like, I am a hero. I am ready for adventure. And I haven't felt like that due to a soundtrack in years.
I think that's a really interesting kind of thematic juxtaposition. We've buried the old, and it created the new, which is also this vast, expansive sea. Right. So cool.
Right. And not better, or even you could say worse, although I don't know if you get a chance to see the old world in this, and maybe that's an ending thing or not. I don't know.
Spoilers.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But I don't know about that, but I don't know which one was worse, but I don't know. I think this is a pretty great world that they're in, even though they are very separated and and there's dangers out there, which of course, you just need from a gameplay perspective, from nothing else. I'm really looking forward to seeing where that articulates and how that strikes me, because, I think we can think about that too in our own life and world, right? The things we have today are not what we had 50 years ago. And you can say, oh, things were better back in like the 50s, but were they? I don't know.
Right.
Better, I think, is relative. Just different. It might be the better term for it. So it doesn't seem like it's a Fallout thing where clearly things were better before the bombs fell. Like, these things are not great here.
Well, and the game doesn't really like come down one way or another on that. Like, you're tasked with this, right? Like you have this sort of like task of like you are trying to preserve like the new world or whatever. That's kind of your charge as the the hero of time or whatever. But the game doesn't like overtly come out and like tell you like, no, like this was all so bad. It's really just like it's a result of like hubris, of the way things once were, and an unwillingness to let them go is literally the antagonistic force of this game.
And when you think back to Wind Waker, what was the first moment when you were playing it where it hit you like, okay, this is something different and special?
The one part where you have to sneak in with like Tetra, and you get slingshotted when in the barrel, and you got to sneak onto the island, and like that's the thing that got me. It's like, okay, this is cool, and like me, I play Metal Gear Solid, so stealth is easy for me. So I was like, okay,
yeah,
I revel in that.
Oh, if I can sneak in a game, I'm sneaking. Let me sneak. Let me just sneak around. Let me tell you something. I'm playing just like Majora. These games were released in a period of time where I didn't play a lot of games. So I'm also in conjunction playing Wind Waker. I put it on hold to play Majora, and I'll get back to Wind Waker for that episode. Mm-hmm. But I was like, one of my first guests, when we talked about this, he said, there is a point in this game where it'll happen. And if that happens and you don't immediately get what this game's about or get immediately charmed, it's not for you. And I guarantee you it was that slingshot moment, because when that happened, when they put me in a barrel, how am I going to get over there? Slingshot, barrel, 3, 2, 1, and it zooms in.
on his astonished face, and it flings me over. I'm like, okay, I am super here for this. This works. And before that, it was when he leaves the island with his, and I think it's his aunt, that I think it's not his grandma or his aunt. He kind of tells his grandma, I gotta leave because my sister got taken away.
Mhm.
And she has this resigned moment where she gives him the shield and the sword, like, and the tunic.
Yeah. That part was awesome.
And at that point, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am actually feeling bad for this situation. I'm feeling emotions. And this is before I played Majora.
Mhm.
So for me, that was a very impactful moment. I'm like, I think this might be what he was talking about. And then when I got slingshotted onto a giant fortress, I'm like, okay, I am very much here for it. I'm here for a talking ship. I am here for the guy who's in like the Elvis suit on the opening island, just dancing by himself. I am here for all of you wonderful, joyful people.
Why do you think this game was so... I mean, I think I know the answer. I have my own answer for it, but why do you think this game was so just not critically panned? Because I think critics were fine for it, but just fan panned, not to use a rhyme.
Yeah, and I mean two things.
Yeah,
two things there. I think one of it was just the stupid like Space World demo they showed when the GameCube launched. They were like, "Here's a cool 3D looking Zelda game," and it like looked like Ocarina of Time in HD.
Right.
And so now everybody was like ready for Ocarina of Time in HD, and then we got Wind Waker, which is very much not Ocarina of Time.
No.
That, but I think that's kind of like a surface level disappointment. I think on a deeper level, this is the first time we've seen like a I don't know, that's so weird to like think about. Like Link was basically a kid until Ocarina of Time. So,
right, yeah.
And then we had Ocarina of Time, and now all anybody wanted was more Ocarina of Time. And then they didn't get that, and they were mad about it. To me, that's like the most simple explanation of why it was panned. It has since been redeemed. I feel like people who panned it back then have turned around on it because they actually played it and realized that it's just a fantastic game.
Gamers expected a thing, didn't get the thing they wanted, and got really, really mad. Boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? I think the biggest lesson we all can learn from, or at least I learned from this exploration of Wind Waker, apart from the fact that it's a wonderful game and it's got amazing characters and beautiful visuals and timeless music, timeless music, is the very fact that when it first came out, no one wanted anything to do with it. Again, none of my friends cared about Wind Waker, and again, I was at the age where we were falling out of that anyway, but it was the kiddie game. And if I've personally taken anything away from this episode, it's to remind myself that there's always something more than what's on the surface. If I see a game in a trailer, appreciate it for what's being presented, but understand there's probably more. Good, bad, and different, there's always something underneath the waves. There's always something beneath the ocean waiting to be uncovered. And as a result, maybe I should maintain some childlike wonder and not rush to rash judgments. Because if I hadn't, I may have experienced this game in the year 2002 and have it blow me away in a completely different manner. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of A Gamer Looks at 40. Thank you for indulging me in this very long Zelda series. We're almost done. April 3rd is the final episode, Dunsky. Probably a couple more Zelda things, but that's basically it. If you've enjoyed this episode, there's 6 months of content to check out. Put it in the queue and enjoy it. And until next time, may the wind be ever at your back, and may your life be always filled with a little bit of childlike wonder.